Hello and welcome to February's Q&A for the Patreon on the channel. I'm going to jump straight in. Apologies as well. I know I've already said it a couple of times for being late on this one. I've just had a very, very wild 3 weeks of being very busy. So jumping in. First questions are from Attila. Attila's left 2 questions. I don't have a question, but do have some ideas for episodes. Okay. Number 1, after the One Ring solo mode released and you had a go, you could interview Sean Tompkins about the design process of Strider mode. This could be part 2 of your roundtable episode. Yeah, possibly. I've interviewed Sean once already for Mud and Blood, the Mud and Blood podcast. Mud and Blood podcast. And afterwards, I had a chat with Sean a couple more times. Sean is actually currently a Patreon of this, Patreon supporter of this Patreon. So he might be watching this. Sean doesn't do many interviews anymore. I think possibly the one that I did on Mud and Blood might have been one of his last. So I don't know whether he will come on to talk. That's fine if he doesn't. So we'll see. I would love to talk to him about it. So if he's up for it, then I probably would be quite cool to have him on to talk through how it was developed and that sort of thing. And we'll see. Part 2 of a roundtable episode. Yeah, I would like to do a second solo roundtable. I haven't really looked deeply into it yet because I've got a lot of other content to produce. And when I did the first solo roundtable, that was at a point where I was doing a lot of streaming, like multiple times per week, and I had basically some weeks where I had filler slots, so basically nothing planned, and I was trying to think of things to put in there. This tends to happen with new channels or new podcasts, that sort of thing. It happened on Mud and Blood at the beginning as well. We were trying to think of, what can we stick in these slots here? And it certainly happened at the beginning with this channel as well, to an extent. But that's not to say the solo roundtable was filler content. It was something I did put a lot of planning into to make happen and was very excited about, and still think is a very good episode or a very good video. But it's not something that is easy to slot in around the other content I've got. That's not to say it won't happen. Again, I would like it to happen. It's just not something I've got planned yet. So we'll see. It might be something I prompt some feedback from Patreon supporters for, in terms of if there are any solo designers that you think might be worth inviting to a second roundtable. Either some from the first roundtable, plus maybe some new people. I think it would be good to have some new voices in as well. So we'll see. And topics would be good as well, because the first one was kind of very general. And if I do future roundtables like that, I would probably want to be doing slightly more focused themes. So maybe around different types of solo gaming, like journaling, maybe like looking at solo journaling. What's it about? How do you design for it? That sort of thing. Second question from Attila. You could do a GM Toolbox type episode on your own solo projects, like Forbidden Lands, Vaesen, and Year Zero Mini. GM Toolbox type episode. Yeah, so kind of like talking about. Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. Yeah, possibly. I kind of try and do that to an extent with the behind-the-scenes Foundry stuff. So I kind of do that already, I think. I definitely did it for Forbidden Lands. My own solo. Oh, yeah, gotcha. Forbidden Lands solo that I'm officially producing. So my official solo projects. Maybe. For Forbidden Lands and Vaesen, I'd have to get permission from Free League to do that. And I don't know exactly what kind of GM toolbox you kind of are referring to there for those projects. From my perspective, what I was talking about before with Foundry, for the solo campaigns I've run on the channel, I have done Ooh, no, I think I've only done it for one, two. Think about Foundry episodes, because that's basically the GM toolbox I'm using for solo games is basically Foundry. That's got all my tools. That is my toolbox. I load everything into there, and I did a Foundry episode for Forbidden Lands. I'm doing a Foundry episode coming up for my solo One Ring campaign that's coming up, and yeah, I'm not sure what other kind of toolboxy type of content you would like to see. So maybe, yeah, drop me a line in Discord, Attila, and let me know kind of the kind of your thoughts around a GM toolbox, or ask tomorrow when the March post goes up for questions for March. Maybe you can expand on that a bit if you want me to go into it in a video. I hope you don't mind these ideas. Don't mind them at all. Next question is from Zed. How are you going to distribute the Year Zero mini spins? Patreon, itch, DriveThruRPG, especially the one about zombies. They're all going to be on Patreon. So, yeah, all of the spins will be... Patreon supporters will get access to them, both in beta format, and I think I'm going to put a big asterisk next to this big caveat here and say, as long as they're lightweight spins, then they'll also be uploaded on Patreon. If they are more standalone, and the zombie one isn't actually going to be a Year Zero mini spin, it's going to be a Year Zero light prototype. It's going to be the first game using Year Zero mini. It's one of the last things I talked about before I ended up not doing it. And that one is probably going to come with a voucher on the Patreon page. If you look at the Patreon, like my Patreon blurb on the front page, it talks about the different rewards and things. And for my Meteor projects, that you basically would get a 50% off voucher, assuming you're a Patreon supporter at the time it goes live. So I won't be back doing my catalog and when people join, giving them 50% vouchers on everything I've produced in the past. It's for current backers. Other than that, I don't know whether it'll be on DriveThruRPG or itch. Possibly. It's hard to say. Year Zero Mini is being sold on DriveThruRPG, not on itch, and I don't know if that's going to change in the future, but at the moment I would like to keep everything together in a single marketplace. So that means I definitely will be selling them on DriveThruRPG to start. Might change to itch in the future. I don't know. That's pretty vague. But yeah, Patreon, they'll definitely be going up on Patreon, the lighter weight ones, and itch and DriveThruRPG, at least one of them. I mean, it kind of depends on when I release them and whether I've ended up migrating possibly from DriveThruRPG to itch, or vice versa. I might be migrating from itch to DriveThruRPG. Probably not. There are some issues with itch in that if you have a low price point, it doesn't make a lot of sense to sell it on itch because there's a minimum card fee per transaction of like 20 cents per transaction that goes to like PayPal or Stripe or however people are paying. That comes out of the purchase price. Then there's itch's cut as well on top of that. And so if you're selling, and so it's 20% plus a fee of like, I don't know, 1% or 2 or 3%, something like that for the card transaction. So if I'm selling something for like $1, I'm straight up losing 20% of that $1 for the minimum 20 cent card transaction fee on itch, and that doesn't happen on DriveThruRPG. So for cheaper products, it actually kind of makes more sense to be selling it on DriveThruRPG. And for more expensive products, I get a better cut on itch, but I think it only really starts making sense over a certain amount. Anyway, that doesn't really answer your question too much. The zombie one will be probably on DriveThruRPG, and yeah, I'm probably going to be trying to keep most of those in one place just because it's got a bit more of a market share. It's a bit easier for people to find it, etc. And I don't know. I really like itch, but drive-through RPGs makes a little bit more sense in a lot of ways for role-playing products. Hashtag FarmLife has a question. For people wanting to get into game design, what are some concepts around matching dice mechanics to the type of game you're trying to build? Oh, what are some good resources for additional research on this? Yeah, I think, God, um, really, I'm familiar with a lot of different role-playing games and a lot of different dice mechanics, so kind of broadening your horizons and trying lots of different systems is a good way to be familiar with different different ways of rolling dice and different that sort of thing. It's also ideal to try and at least run some of those games or experience them in some way, so you're not just reading them, you're also experiencing. Like it's one thing for somebody to say this is a grimdark game, and then when the dice start rolling, you're like, actually this feels kind of epic. It doesn't really feel very, despite the buzzwords that the author has been kind of throwing about it, it kind of doesn't feel that way. So really trying to play something is ideal, or trying to speak to people who have played it and know something about game design is another one. And that's where I would recommend going for communities. And really the best place to go is the what was the Mud and Blood Patreon, the Mud and Blood Discord server, which is now the Toa Tabletop server as it's changed branding. Because there are hundreds of people in there, and there is a huge interest in game design. There's a lot of people who have who are game designers themselves in there. And from a wide variety of tastes as well. So you get people who really like kind of traditional crunchy games. You get people who are massively into the indie scene, the story game scene. It's kind of covers the whole gamut of approaches. There are also lots of communities that are focused more on one type of gaming, like the OSR. There's lots of OSR communities which will give you OSR specific advice. But really, I think Toa Tabletop / Mud and Blood, that Discord server is a really, really good place to get feedback or ideas or advice, because people are really knowledgeable and really friendly, and it's a great place to kind of do that. So I don't know about I don't know about resources in terms of like blogs or things. I'm sure there's lots of them out there, and you can probably ask in various places and get them. I'm not very knowledgeable of that because I don't really do that myself. I kind of mostly design around the Year Zero engine because I'm pretty keen on it. And I am familiar though with lots of other types of dice types, or like dice mechanics. But I'm just thinking here about, thinking about your question a bit more about concepts around matching the dice mechanics to the game you're trying to build. It's kind of hard to say without knowing the type of game you're trying to build. But really the way you want to do it is you want to start with identifying the themes of the game that you want to make. Come up with some design goals in terms of, what you want the game to be doing, what the game's about, what the players are expected to be doing in it, that sort of thing. So really identifying the core of what the game is about as what you want it to be about, I should say, before you've started designing it, in terms of the kind of experience you want people to have. And one good resource for that actually is called the I'll actually look it up and put a link in the description. There's a blog post from the Forge, I think it's called the Forge forums, from, I don't know, about 10 years ago or so, and it's called it came out of the Forge, and it's a blog that's called something like the Power 3 or the something like that. There's always 3 questions that have to do with game design. Then it's split out into what's called the Power 19, which are an expansion of those 3 questions. And really, if you go through those questions and answer them, they're all questions relating to what's your game about. And the context for it are 19 questions, or 3 or 19 questions that you should be pitching your game to a community of game designers about, because that's what that forum was. and it was a way to try and consolidate people asking for game design advice about their game, kind of, and it was basically giving an overview of kind of what it's about. But it's also a good checklist to go through as a designer before you've designed something, to think about things like, what the game is about, and what do you want players to be doing in it? What do you want the player characters to be doing in it? World building stuff, even dice mechanics sort of related stuff. So going through those sorts of prompts initially is a really good way of kind of coming up with some of that. Once you have your kind of design goals and the themes that you want, the tone and the themes that you want, that's when I would recommend you start looking at dice mechanics. Sometimes you have there's a dice mechanic that you want to use, like the Year Zero engine, or I don't know, BRP or something like that, or a D20 OSR clone, something like that, that you just think, oh, this is a really great mechanic, I really like that, I'm gonna make a game around that because it has a lot of the themes that I like. I really like the themes of that dice mechanic, and there's some just interesting implementations I can think of around that. That's another valid way of doing things. But if you want to start off from scratch with a full standalone game, you would probably want to think of the dice mechanic after you've got all that other stuff out of the way. So yeah, I hope that answers your question a bit. I did do a kind of a limited run of game design episodes on the Mud and Blood podcast, which again you can find at Toa Tabletop. I'll also put a link in the description. I'm just making a note of this so I don't forget after I've recorded the video. Yeah. But yeah, did a game design series, which basically was Liam, my co-host, and I going through those questions on a podcast episode. First, we did a bunch of pitches to each other where we came up with some ideas for a game that we kind of liked the ideas of, agreed one, fleshed it out a little bit. Then we went through these prompts to come up with the themes and the game design kind of ideas we had, and then we started developing it. And we got to the point where we had developed a prototype for it. I think we'd even run a combat quickly with it, and that was the last episode. And that was like I think more than a year, maybe 2 years ago. And we both didn't quite work. We didn't like the prototype, and there was so much other stuff going on that we just kind of parked it and never came back to it. So anyway, but the initial start of that, even though it was kind of like a failed project, if you will, we do go through that process. So it's worth looking at. Yeah. So I'll put some links in the description so you can go check those out. Okay. Kobiak came in right at the end today with a last question, just nipped in there at the last moment. What are your thoughts on releasing a somewhat play-tested game for free just to get more eyes on it and more feedback? With your own games, where do you draw the line between free, pay what you want, and paid versions? Yeah, I think you really need to think about this. This is kind of like a business kind of concept, a question here for me. And playtesting is really important. You want eyes on it, and ideally as many people as you can. You want as much feedback from as many people as you can. So putting something out for free, it does make a lot of sense. I would just be reluctant when you put something out for free, a lot of people are going to grab it without ever looking at it. So what I would recommend is, if you want to do it that way, which is very, very valid, is to create a free version of a game. Make sure it's called a free version, that you're looking for playtesting feedback. Make sure that there's a clickable URL in the PDF or the Google Doc or whatever to a feedback form where people can give you their feedback. And normally the way I've done it is with these feedback forms is at the very top, it's leave the name that you want credited in the final product, so that people who fill out the form will get a credit as a playtester in the game. So they get kind of a little bit of something back for doing that. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the game. With me, I did that with Year Zero Mini. I did a free version of it. and it was it was like a beta version of it. It was completely free, and I've had hundreds, and in fact, I've had thousands of people purchase that. I think thousands of people, or hundreds at least, maybe over 1,000, because it's been up for a very long time. People have grabbed that. I've had a little bit of feedback from it. Really, probably less than 10 people have given feedback. So not a huge amount of return on the number of downloads, but still, it's gotten out there and into people's hands, and starting to get some kind of market exposure, if you will, which is important as well. So I did that with Year Zero Mini, and then when it released, I kept that listing and changed it from being a free beta, to being a free version of the final product. Then I released a paid product, a paid version as well, and basically told people, if you really like Year Zero Mini, you've got the full free version here. But if you want to support me and my work, then go buy the paid version as well, which is only $2. And as a thank you, you get the phone PDF version of it there as well. But the phone PDFs are, I know a lot of people like them, but really I designed it initially for this landscape spread. And that's, to me, the way the game is meant to be experienced, because that took a lot more layout effort for me. And that's available to everyone, free or paid. So that's kind of a pay what you want there, because there's two versions. There's a free version, and then there's also a premium version. So that's one way you can do it. Pay what you want I did do pay what you want with my workshop content on the Free League workshop. I've got 3 products there. They were initially pay what you want, and I ended up changing that, and I've gone to them being paid only, but I've put the entire content of those small products into the preview. So basically, anybody who wants to see the game, try the game for free without any risk of paying anything, can download the preview on DriveThruRPG. They get the entire document with a big watermark across the middle that says preview. But they have the whole entire content of what I've produced. So they basically, if they like it, then they can pay the $1 or $2 that I'm asking for it to basically remove the watermark. And that's kind of like pay what you want. And the reason I did that is because I wasn't getting a lot of, with pay what you want on DriveThruRPG, at least, there were a ton of downloads for those games, and very, very few people paying for them, which is fine. But I did want to try and increase the return on the time it took to kind of make those. And I saw that other people had been doing that and thought that was a pretty good idea, because it's still kind of offering the same thing for free, but it's putting a bit more onus on the purchaser, or the person who's interested in the game, to actually purchase it, because it's, if you're trying to read a PDF or work with a PDF or play off of a PDF, which has the big preview thing slapped across the middle, it's kind of annoying, but it's perfectly doable. So yeah, it's just something I kind of like a bit more. In terms of pay what you want, Itch is a much better platform for pay what you want. You get a much better return on or the ratio of people who pay nothing or get it for free and the people who pay is much higher on Itch than it is on DriveThruRPG for some reason. And I think that's because when you have it as pay what you want and they click to get the game, it comes up with a window that pops up and says, here's the recommended amount to pay for it. And so it kind of looks like if you can kind of, it's kind of prompting the person to pay money for it, rather than in DriveThruRPG where you can just kind of change the value. I don't know, it's kind of subtle, but for some reason you get the ratio of people who pay against people who don't is a bit higher. So I have Year Zero Nano up as a pay what you want title on Itch, and it doesn't have a huge amount of sales. It's a pretty niche product as well, but there are occasionally get people purchasing that too. So kind of talking through all that, where do I draw the line in future for bigger products? So at the moment, I'm only selling small products. I'm selling workshop titles, which are 1, 2, or 3 pages long. I'm selling Year Zero Mini, which is about 7 pages long. I am selling my Pitchfork Village Creator, which is two sides of a sheet of paper, and I'm selling Year Zero Nano, which is quite short, like 2 or 3 pages. And those are, for all of those, I mean, this, when you talk about drawing the line, those are all products I'm happy to give the entire thing out there as a free product in terms of Nano and Year Zero Mini, right? And even the workshop titles. With the Pitchfork one, that is the only title I've got that is completely paid for, where there is no free option for that. And that's because has artwork in it that I've commissioned and paid for. And I'm trying to, I've actually put a lot of my own money into Pitchfork for artwork. And I kind of want to treat that as a more premium offering rather than something that's a bit more like niche and indie. This is going to be, like, when it eventually comes out, it's going to be a much more premium offering. So that game is going to be Pitchfork. Anything that comes out with Pitchfork is probably going to be paid only. Obviously, Patreon supporters get that for free. In fact, there's a Patreon post for Patreon supporters, if you dig back into the archives, where I've attached that as a that specific Village Creator document is a PDF for Patreon supporters too. But yeah, for me, I think going forward, I'm likely to do the method of pay what you want on itch. Drive through RPG is likely to be paid for with a preview of the entire thing if it's a smaller product. For bigger products I'm releasing, there's likely to be like I was just talking about, a free playtesting version, which is going to be cut down, etc. Which will then evolve into, that same listing will then become the free listing of the product, which will probably always be art free and a bit more limited in scope if it's a bigger game. And then I will have the bigger game as a full product that you have to pay money for. So if you look at Stars Without Number, for example, by Kevin Crawford, he does a similar model where he has art-free versions of most of his, I think all, if not all, then most of his books, most of his games. And then you have these like deluxe versions which have artwork and they have a few more tables and appendices and things like that. And they are paid for. So I like that model as well. So for bigger products, that's kind of the way I probably draw the line. So I'll stop talking about that because I've kind of been, blathering on about it for a little bit now. But that was a good question. I hope I was able to answer that to a certain extent. And if you got any, want to hear any more about it, then you can reach out to me on Discord or drop another question in, a follow-up question for March's Q&A. That post for March's Q&A will be going up tomorrow on Patreon. So thanks very much, everyone, for the questions. And I'm just going to quickly check on YouTube, on the YouTube text chat. No one's asked me any questions there, so I'm going to leave it here. In fact, I'm just going to refresh Patreon just to see if someone snuck a cheeky one in right at the end. They didn't. So those are my questions for February. Thanks very much for watching and for asking the questions. And thank you again very much for your support as well. Catch you next month. Or technically this month because we're in March. All right. Cheers.